All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second installment of Conversations with the Chorale. My name is Max Nolan. I am the music director of the Loudon Chorale, and I am super crazy pumped to introduce probably like one of my best friends on the entire earth, someone who I'm in constant communication with throughout the week, Arielle Siegel. She is a music teacher in Monroe Township, New Jersey. Teaches high school there, has many choirs. I can attest she is one of the most humble people on earth as well, and will hate me saying this, but they are just some of the best high school choirs I have ever heard. She's an amazing teacher and an amazing friend. So welcome, Arielle. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Max.
Here
Thank
we
you for the very generous welcome.
Yes, and we get to take our offline conversations online, which is really
Love it.
it's thrilling for us. And but one thing that Arielle and I, the reason this started, is like so many choir directors, in the world right now. When COVID hit in sort of March, and we sort of made our way through that school year, the Loudon Craw finished our season sort of in our own way. And when we hit the summer, we were all like, what are we going to do? Because we had this, we knew we were going to be teaching virtually. We knew that that was coming our way. And we just like, everyone was lost. No one quite knew what to do. And everyone was throwing ideas at the wall. And so Arielle and I, throughout this time, have really been throwing ideas off each other. Those in the chorale who are watching this know that so much of what we did for our winter virtual performance came out of conversations I had with Arielle. And so what we thought we'd do today is just sort of put our thoughts and what we've done out there for people to see. Because just to continue to set this up, we really have been passionate about finding sustainable and medium to lowish tech ways of creating virtual performances and sort of teaching and leading choirs at a distance. So Arielle, just to start, can you just like walk us through what the sort of first semester of the school year has been for you, and tell us a little bit about your virtual performance that you actually released this week?
Sure. So, as Max said, I teach high school choir in Central Jersey, and I have seven choirs. Four of them are curricular. They meet during the school day. Three are extracurricular, considered clubs. So, the way that our year typically works is we will rehearse from September to mid December, put on our winter concert in person, and then start up again January, February, and put on a concert in May. When everything sort of time stood still in March, we had to, as Max said, revisit how we're going to make that work. So, what my first semester ended up looking like was just this hodgepodge of how to make it work. I continued to explain to the students and was very open with them and said, listen, nobody has taught through a pandemic in my lifetime. There's no rule book. There's no this is right, this is wrong. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm a genius on the topic. And I think having that conversation first was really, really awesome. And so what I ended up doing was just kind of figuring out day by day what was successful. So I would do things like creating Google Forms often and just say to the students, honestly, I gave them, some constraints. So it wasn't just like this open ended mess, but I just said, what's working? Do you like live rehearsal? Do you like some independent time? And I kind of came up with this. They like the 50-50. So what I ended up doing was creating a goal. And so they had this, they saw the light at the end of the tunnel. They didn't feel like their time was being wasted. And they put together, depending on the level of the ensemble, I have some beginner, some intermediate, and some honors weighted ensembles, 1 to 4 pieces per ensemble. And I created practice tracks, learning tracks, and that was, I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, that was a bulk of the prep. But then I had a moment to kind of breathe during live instruction time, which typically as choral directors, we'd be like, boom, 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 let's make change to sound, let's be really active. And that took kind of a moment for me to actually understand that my work was just being done differently. I wasn't doing any less work, but essentially through that process of kind of figuring out what the students liked and disliked about the rehearsal structure, we were completely virtual. I did not see students until 1 week of hybrid. That has now been switched back to virtual. So, really, I could say we were pretty much virtual. And we just made it work. We submitted recordings, and as I'm sure we'll talk about, I spent some time putting that together using programs that were on my school computer. And then we had a virtual concert that was premiered on our actual concert day, that was kind of a goal that I set for myself, to again make the students feel like, wow, this wasn't time wasted. Wow, there's no product ready. So on our concert day, this past Wednesday, December 16th, the concert was released via YouTube, via a YouTube playlist. There wasn't an excessive big file or anything, just separate songs so families could enjoy in whatever capacity they wanted. And it seems to have gone over really well with the students and the community and their families.
Yeah, and I saw the videos, everybody, and if we can, we might link to them in this video too. They're just really, really exceptional. And one thing, Arielle, that I sort of you touched on here, that before we go into more detail about sort of how we make these products, but something I realized too was really, it's a sort of a term that's in ed circles these days, but this idea of flipping a classroom. And I think that one thing as choir teachers and choir directors, with community choirs or church choirs, we're used to is sort of walking in a room and just making it go, right? And making the magic happen. And I think for a lot of us, the challenge has been sort of flipping that script, right? To create those materials so that in those live moments with our kids, sort of they can be sort of really successful. I think that to me has been, once I sort of accepted that, I think teaching actually kind of got easier. It actually even got a little fun. I mean, I wish I was in person, but once you get that flow down, it actually can be fun to have these types of rehearsals with people. Once
Yeah,
you have the material set.
I have to agree. And I know we spoke about this briefly. There was kind of this one day where a light bulb went off, and I said, oh, so instead of walking in and just being kind of in the moment, and that's when I put my 100% energy in, I'm going to instead kind of invest it in different pockets. And some of that may be creating these practice tracks and rehearsal tracks to the best of my ability, which I've never really traveled down that avenue sort of as in depth as I needed to for this kind of virtual setting. But then I realized when I produce that and I do that in the kind of flipped classroom capacity, do it outside of the classroom during my prep time, then I could bring that to the students and they have me, that 100% in person me, but it just looks and sounds a little different.
No, it's sort of amazing. And one thing, those who, as you're meeting Arielle and hearing her sort of talk about sort of her teaching, she's one of the most organized people on earth. And like she thrives under like knowing things and being organized. And I actually think that's something too that, as conductors, we're trained to have structured, organized rehearsals. And so I think that for both of us, there was that moment that clicked when we were like, wait, we just need to organize what we're doing in a virtual world, right? And then suddenly we're able to have sort of these efficient, rehearsals. At Loud and Chorale, we did for several weeks, we did a hybrid rehearsal. So we had a group that was outdoors, and I was live streaming to folks who were, at home. So we had this hybrid mix. And the first time I did it, it was like I felt like personally like it was a train wreck. I felt like my head was everywhere. But once I sort of organized and realized, what were some things that I could do that worked for the people at home and for the people outdoors, and found where that sort of that middle part of the Venn diagram is, then it started to work. But and I also love that you were so open with your kids, that, and your singers about, this is all great experiment. And I think when you don't try to be a know-it-all, right? When you're sort of like, hey, don't know if this is going to work today, let's try this. I think the singers are more open. And
Yeah, I have to agree. And, as people continue to have these conversations about the virtual choral rehearsal space, I'm continually seeing people say this is, not perfect, and people kind of being really raw and honest. And I respect that. And I think that as choral directors, it's really important to have in the back of your head that, like, this isn't going to feel 100% right, probably ever. And I think we are used to that satisfaction of like, we have the flow, we have the organization, we're ready to go. And you're not going to get that because this is a total new thing and we were not trained in this. But if you have in the back of your mind that mindset and then continue on your, day to day, knowing it's not perfect, but I'm going to reach out to the students via Google Form and ask for some input. I'm going to reflect after class and be like, why wasn't that good? And not just go, ugh, and move on. And if you take those moments, I think we could really make something beautiful out of this quite unfortunate time for our profession.
No, 100%. And that sort of is sort of a beautiful transition, because we all know, there's amazing vaccine news on the horizon and all this stuff, but we're probably all still going to be in this mode for, I would say, at least the rest of the school year. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I look at this, you know, in like several months and I'm like, Max was so stupid to think. But I really, as I look at it, I really, you know, I think we've talked about this too. So as much as everything's a grand experiment, you know, we want to learn from what's worked and what didn't work, right? And so I would love to talk, sort of transition ourselves into thinking about, as I've been sort of calling it, a sustainable, low-ish tech way of sort of doing things. And Arielle and I sort of have been using sort of a similar process. We both also just straight up have been using Apple products, but you know, we both have MacBooks and that's what we use. But we've been using sort of the sort of homegrown Apple apps. So we've mostly been using GarageBand and iMovie to make our virtual products. And so that's just sort of an upfront thing. Two products that, I mean, I have mad respect for the people that use them. I know a lot of people have gone the Premiere Pro route, you know, to make those real big virtual choir videos. I I personally had bad experiences even experimenting with them. I felt like my computer, which is a pretty decent device, was crashing a lot. It took me forever to do one video, right? I was doing this with church early on too. And I just felt like it wasn't sustainable. I felt like I was going to spend months making one piece of music, which is sort of how, you know, especially for the Loud and Chorale's concert, you know, like I said, we used GarageBand and we used iMovie. And I think they worked sort of really beautifully. Now, my students, well, my community choir members and my church choir members have all sorts of different devices. I mean, that is the Wild West, which is another reason I wanted to go with a simple process, right? Because I don't know what kind of tech they have. You know, we have super techies that have full desktop and microphone setups. Then we have people who just have an iPhone and a tablet. And so so can you just remind us before we dig into this, you know, what tech did your students have sort of from their school?
Sure, sure. So I agree. I'll start off by saying I know a lot of people that have a lot of background in the fancier programs, but I felt after kind of taking a look, I was lucky enough for my school to download Premiere Pro for me, but I do have a laptop, not a desktop computer, and I felt like with opening up multiple videos and multiple audio files, it was difficult to sustain. And then on the perspective of the students, as you mentioned, everybody has different tech. My district does supply each student with an iPad, but I did not go that route for recording, as sometimes the GarageBand on the iPads, there's some settings on, and with voice memos, some of them have the app. So what I ended up going with was using cell phones. Whether it was an iPhone using the voice memo app or an Android, there's a voice recorder app that the students were able to navigate, or if they could figure out the iPad, whatever they had. And we have our learning management system. I know many people use Google Classroom. Ours is called Schoology. And I would create assignments, and they would be required to listen to my track with headphones as they were singing along with it. So that way I could line up all the tracks together. And they would, you know, we would go over how to record. So I would say, for example, with your phone, we created a little Google slideshow, which had some pointers. So put the phone below chin level, don't ruffle papers, and we got better and better at it as time went on. And the students would submit those tracks, just audio, and then I would compile it into GarageBand, which I know there are a couple of other options out there where like Soundtrap and other programs where students could hear others, and it does a lot of the compiling for you. But as Max and I, you know, communicated all the time, I got better and better from working with colleagues and just time and experience in the program, where it actually was easier for me to get those tracks and just put them in myself. I was doing songs in an hour, 2 hours, and so it really got pretty efficient.
Yeah, and I just sort of want to pause here to say one amazing thing about, and I can say this is true for children. You know, I work with the youngest kids I work with are fifth graders, and then I work with 80-year-olds, right? So I've seen the spectrum of ages. Everyone gets better at this, which again I don't think should shock us. I mean, people learn, like, you know, people learn when they do something over and over again. But this is a reason, in my opinion, that finding a more sustainable way was good, because it meant we could do more projects. Like if you're only ever working on one or two giant videos that take hours and all-nighters of your time, like your people are not learning the skills. They're not getting better at it, and you're also kind of not getting better either because you're not doing
Yeah.
a lot of reps. You know?
Yeah, and it's funny. I had a student today, as this was the first time I saw this class since I released the concert, and they hadn't heard one of their songs, the second song they worked on, the most recent. And they did it much quicker than the first one. And this student kind of said, "Hey, Miss Siegel, we sounded really good on that song," because they hadn't heard it yet. And I said, "Yeah, because you're getting better and better at it." And he was like, "I was not expecting that." So, it's funny. The students genuinely hear it and they feel like they're a part of something and they feel really successful.
Yeah, and we're making stuff. I think that's a really important thing. I think, we people get into the arts and music and performing arts for a million reasons, but one of, at least for me, and I think probably for you as well, just because I know you, we like performing, right? We like making stuff. We like putting on concerts. That's part of the performing arts. And if we're thinking about sort of whether we are building those skills in young people or whether we're help sustaining those skills in sort of middle age and older people, people want to feel accomplished. That's one of the reasons we get engaged with the arts is it builds that sort of confidence in us.
Yeah.
And that's why I think I was so bent on sort of, still creating things with the kids and helping them create stuff. And so you touched on something, and I kind of want to transition to it too, because this is like kind of our golden rule number one. I kind of want you to talk more about it. I remember there was one phone call, and again, we talk so often that I don't
Yeah.
think we ever pinpoint when this call is. There's one call where we both sort of were like, it's about the audio. It is about the audio product. It's about the singing in the audio device, which again feels really common sense because we're music teachers. We were singing teachers, choral teachers. But I think, when all these really cool, big virtual choir videos came out, everyone got really, I think, blinded in a sense by the cool videos. And we sort of forgot that we are teaching a sound skill, a musical skill first and foremost. So can you talk a little bit about sort of prioritizing the audio that you get with your students first and how that sort of led you to a better product sort of at the end?
Yeah, so it's funny. The virtual concert that I put out this past week had 9 songs on it, and I got some feedback from people in the field saying, "Wow, 9 songs! How?" And I didn't really think anything of it, and then upon reflecting, I realized if I'm doing a huge project for every single song, 9 projects is massive. But when you take a magnifying glass and look at what I did, there's a lot of shortcuts in terms of the other things besides the audio that allowed it to be, a cohesive, pretty lengthy virtual concert. And so I made audio, as Max just said. We talked all the time. We both made audio a priority. And I said to myself, I'll figure out the video. Max was awesome and shared really, really cool creative tips that I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment. But I just made sure that audio was first. So I know that a lot of people submit virtual choir videos with video from their students or their community choirs, and then they could take the audio out of it. I decided to go the route of, well, the video will be next up, just audio files. So like I said before, the voice memo, whatever capacity, I received all those files, which actually take up a lot less space as well. And then I made sure that the audio was done. And that was the other big thing. I think that was a win. I think as choral directors, we like to be really organized and we like to plan. And normally we'd be planning our rehearsal. We'd say by September, they're going to know all the notes on a neutral syllable. But instead, now I was planning, okay, by September, I'm going to have this song a rough draft. I'm going to listen to it, give the students feedback. By October, I'm going to have this song actually recorded and done, and we're going to move on to our next song. So the structure looked a bit different. But then by the end of October, let's say, which was actually a timeline for many of my ensembles that premiered their songs in December, I had all the audio files done, and I could edit it together and just have that sitting on my computer. And then when we did kind of the low tech, we'll call it budget version of the grid boxes, I was able to just overlay that audio, which is so, so important because we are the art of choral singing, not the art of choral looking. And I think, I think it's tough because you want there to be a visual product. Of course, the audience is going to be way more interested, your virtual audience, when they see videos up on the screen, but the students want to hear themselves and they want to hear themselves sound good. And I knew that I needed to prioritize that time. And then later on, I said, oh, and I can do this other creative stuff too. So the audio has a platform, but it wasn't a video for every single song. And I think that the students and community appreciated it just as much.
Yeah, and you said the thing about audio files taking up less space. I mean, I think just from a technical quality of life perspective, as you said, is people who don't have desktop computers, right? Just keeping all those files is a huge challenge if you have all those kids sitting in video files. I'll also say, and this is actually not just for community choir and church choir conductors as well, but some kids actually struggle with getting you a video. I mean, it really, even with Google Drive and stuff, and I will say, especially for a lot of my community choir, less tech savvy community choir members, but even some kids who struggle with maybe some organization issues and stuff, them uploading a video is tough. I also think, just from a personal perspective, I sang in a couple of virtual things early on in the pandemic, right? Like, oh, can you submit a recording for this? And I had this distinct feeling that, like, I loved when someone just wanted audio from me, because like I could sit in my sweatpants and like kind of lay back, especially if it was like low, or if they had me do a bass part, not a tenor
Yeah.
part, I could just sit down and like, look at the music. And no matter what my day was or my life was, I could always do an audio track. Whenever I had to do a video project, I mean, I got to get the lighting right. I have to wear something that's presentable. I got to get the phone propped up right. And it's just a longer process. And again, even for our kids who, we're one period of their day and then they go to math or their other stressful things, right? If they're spending their whole time setting up for the video, they don't have time to worry about what's coming out of their voice, right? What's coming out of their
Yeah.
mouth, right? Like, and so as you sort of mentioned, like, this lets us actually focus on the singing and the music making, which I just
Yeah.
is so important.
And I think you touched upon another good topic of, that comfort, especially when middle, high school,
Mhm.
it's tough, and you don't know, that age old conversation that people have been having. It's not really age old because how long has the pandemic been going on? But the conversation of when we have students that are at home and they don't want to turn their camera on when they're in a Zoom call, because you don't know what their background is, you don't know what their home life is, and I think that could kind of go hand in hand with a video. It's like I'll ask students very rarely for a video of something, like if they're doing a solo or a small group. I'll ask for a neutral background for some ancillary things, and it's tough for some students. I've had students just on the day to day say, hey, I can't record this right now. My house is really loud, so and so. So adding that video component is sometimes really challenging.
Well, and adults too. I mean, again, this is for church and community choir directors too. Like, our adults, I think about the people, I think about the members who have little kids at home, right? Of my choirs who barely, I had people like, I'm so sorry these tracks are so late and blah, blah, blah. And they'd send me 5 at once, but this is the first time. And I'm so happy they were able to submit. But if each of those had been a video they had taken on their cell phone, I think it would have been prohibitive to them sort of participating. One more
Yeah.
thing before we move on from audio, which you talked about at the beginning, and I want you to talk about, because you were Arielle, again, she'll get embarrassed. She's also like one of the best musicians and singers I know. And especially when it comes to like just singing, like pitch perfect, accurate, like nails it kind of person. And so you were super organized about getting your recording tracks made. And as you sort of, this is, in a sense, I think this is sort of, in this virtual choir world, that's sort of our textbook in a sense, right? That is like, and actually, if I could redo everything over again, and actually as I'm planning now for my winter and for my spring with my choirs, I am going to get those tracks made as soon as humanly possible, because that is so often the base of our work in this medium. So can you talk a little bit about how you got those tracks organized and sort of what your process is for that and what you're going to do going forward?
Yeah, so as the year was starting, I was kind of figuring out my way, and I ended up doing practice tracks kind of informally. I would say, hey, here's measures 1 through 40, and I'll plunk out the notes. If we're having difficulty, it's tough to, manage a rehearsal over Zoom. And then I said to myself, I think that's just wasting everybody's time because I want them to get used to hearing good singing in their ear and hearing good musicality and all the right notes, of course, but kind of going above and beyond in the track, which seems really daunting. I would take a look at my folder and go, oh no, I got a lot of music in here. And those first couple weeks were, I won't lie, they were really overwhelming. But then that track is the track that's going to just keep living forever. And, you know, I joke with the students, I'm like, aren't you sick of hearing my voice? But that's what they used. And I was able to, you know, I ended up buying a nicer microphone and adding a couple things, but that doesn't matter. Like I was using these headphones for 90% of the tracks I did for my virtual concert. This was how I sang. I would just have one ear and went and go la la la. And the quality was just fine. I ended up asking another one of our friends to add the bass
Shout out,
part.
shout out to Keith.
Shout out to Keith. So I collaborated and it was great. I had all those tracks ready, and what I ended up doing was I created all of them myself on GarageBand, and then I was able to mess with the levels a little bit. So I created, let's say the song was SATB, I would put the S part all the way up, put the other ones down a bit, and then share that file. And I'd have 4 files available for my choir members, and they'd have it in their ear. And, you know, it was a tough pill to swallow for a moment because I said to myself, wow, could this be interpreted as like cheating? Because like they have the notes, and normally I'd be like, I'm kind of a literacy monster and you have to write in your solfege and you have to figure it out yourself. But I found ways to do that differently. I did a lot more with our sight reading. Through some programs I use, like websites for sight reading, and I just made sure that they got the literacy and the reading and the sort of they made the music, not me giving them the music in different ways.
Mhm.
And I didn't, first day, they didn't have the tracks. We learned a little bit, we got familiar, and then, you know, they had that with them for a portion of the journey because it would be the equivalent of them singing with their section in person. They're staring at me with all on mute. So they need something. And this is, I think, the best that we can give them. Although it kind of seems silly, I think if it was pre-pandemic and we were like, what? They're singing along to the teacher on the tracks? What? But this is what they need. They have nothing. They're in their rooms with nothing.
Yeah. Well, and I will say too, everyone should know because I've worked with them. Arielle is like also an incredible teacher of sort of sight reading, and her kids read like animals, and she is like on it. Like you, every day starts that way with her. And but I will say, I think having a again sustainable process for making performances means you can spend more time on music literacy. It means you can spend more time on sort of music history, which is one of my big things I love to insert into all of my sort of both community choir and to my school class as well. I have more time for that because not every class is spent, oh, you got to fix your camera angle. You have to, you know, working kids through these, and also I can prep for it as the teacher. I think this is something too, which we'll kind of sit back to, but like if you were spending all of your time making a big complicated video or big complicated project, you wouldn't have time to prep those sight reading materials. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have time to research the music I teach the kids so that I can help give them a richer sort of music education or get my community choir sort of more information about stuff. We can't do that if, again, our time is taken up sort of somewhere else. I will also say that, you know, I will say, especially with our, just to bring up Keith again, like it's a different lesson, right? They are like our friend Keith, who I hope watches this and will laugh at this to no end, is one of the greatest singers in the world. And for your young tenors and basses to have Keith's voice in their ear, which with his beautiful tone, with his beautiful attention to musicality and detail, I sang next to Keith in choir for 2 years when we were in school together. I became a better singer. And so to me, all it is that experience deconstructed. And in a sense, and again, I want to go back and do some real listening to this, but this is because this is just my gut. So many of my singers, I think, actually got better throughout this time,
Mm-hmm.
and just on an individual level, and just their pitch accuracy and with the beauty of their singing. And
And
it could be
I,
they're getting better at the medium, but I actually think they're getting better at singing. Sorry.
yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. I know that your sort of capacity with the community choir and the church choir is a little different. You don't have a grade book, you're not assessing in that way. But You're informally assessing, of course, every time you get those recordings. And one thing that I noticed that I actually discussed with a lot of parents at our back to school night at the high school was I'm able to listen to each singer individually multiple times a month, which normal times, I am hearing them in September. Here and there, they'll have a little assessment that they turn in, and then they're just singing in their groups. Maybe I'll, have sectionals and small groups, but I'm able to say, I got this student track. Fix this, this, this. This sounded great. Okay, next time I can actually hear the improvement. And I'd never had that experience. And again, I do things sparingly with assessments during normal times. Hey, pick up your phone and just record this so that I can hear things going on. But the individual singer, I think, is improving in this capacity. So there's all different avenues that we can kind of look at positively. Are
Mhm.
we able to fill up an auditorium or a church and sing? No, we're not. And that's nothing can replace that.
Mhm.
But there's all these little things that we've been starting to talk about in this conversation, and I know me and you have kind of spoken about in passing, that really are quite nice and kind of a change of pace and have a glimmer and show some positivity, I should say.
Yeah, and the classic question of you and me can't wait. I mean, we're giant choir nerds. I mean, that's like as our and so I can't. I will weep profusely the day I go back to conduct a choir again in all in person. But some of these things could be really neat to bring back to a live classroom as well. I think about that sometimes. That what about these procedures? But that's probably sort of getting ahead of itself too much. One thing I also want to circle back to that I think you and we take for granted sometimes, but we just want to say is really important, especially if any music teachers are listening to this. It is a really tough wall to get over to get your singers to record themselves. Singers, especially amateur singers, which is 98% of what we're working with. I mean, occasionally we get a professional in a community or church choir. Occasionally you get a kid that goes on to study music in college, but most of the time we're working with amateurs, right? And most people hate hearing their voice. I hate hearing my voice. You probably are like, oh, I could have fixed this too, right? It's a hard thing to get over, and it's especially hard, I think, for volunteers. So for me, a lot of love and support has had to go into this. A lot of like, no, you can do it. You got this. You can. And as you said, they get better. And I think they have start to hear themselves get better. One thing I've done, especially with some of my middle schoolers, is I've even let kids submit recordings to me without listening to the whole thing, like them listening to their own recording. So if I have a kid who's having a really hard time, like freaked out, like because there should be no stress in music class, right? I will often say to them, hey, you know what, like just record it, check it to make sure you did it right and that it's just your voice, and then send it to me. And like it's about those
Yeah.
baby steps with people, and it's about supporting them and also letting them all know that you know I will hear their voice individually. I think confidentiality is really important with this. I will say Soundtrap is really cool. Like I think Soundtrap is an amazing thing, and many people are using it in amazing ways. For a lot of my groups, I've been very hesitant to use it because especially my middle schoolers, especially my changing voices, my seventh graders, and my sort of eighth graders, I worry about them having other people listen to their voice because it is such a vulnerable time. But even adults, and I'm sure high schoolers have this too. And so, I just wanted to mention that, before you can even do any of this, your people have to feel safe with you.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of two colleagues right now who use Soundtrap daily.
Yeah.
And those of you that don't know what that is, as Max was kind of saying, it's a way for you to put tracks and listen live. So you can hear everybody's tracks as they're coming in. So you kind of have this sense of a choir rehearsal. And I'm a worrywart, and I just think through the kind of perspective of worst case scenario, which may not be my best trait. But I just think, oh, that poor kid that cracks, and everybody's going to listen to them, and oh no, and then someone's going to make fun of so and so, and I just my brain goes down that path. And so I think it works in some circumstances, like if the culture warrants it, I think you could totally make it happen. I would be kind of interested to use it in some of my top level ensembles where I think that they could handle the technology. They won't accidentally delete something. But I give major kudos to those people that are using it from the day to day, because you really have to create a culture in your ensemble that it's like a total judge free zone, and really I know people that use it successfully, and I'd be curious, to maybe use it down the road. But I agree with you. My mind automatically goes to that, like that poor changing voice, or something that could happen that could really set someone off.
Or an aging voice. I mean, an aging voice who maybe they haven't heard their voice in years, and they're just like, what, they have this moment of sort of fear. And one of the hardest parts of this virtual medium, I think, is communication, right? I think part of it is following up on emails when you have hundreds of singers in your life, right? Or it's
Hmm.
really hard to. But I think putting in that effort early on to make people feel supported is sort of a really sort of vital sort of part of that. So
Yeah.
audio, the reason we've talked about audio for the majority of this is because if anyone watching this could like have one thing to take away, is like prioritize your audio experience. Like,
Yes.
oh my, like
Yes.
number one. And even if you never do a video, if you release an album, I mean, that's something I contemplated early on too. Like, you could upload everything to Soundtrap and just release that without.
Yeah, in the spring when this was really first happening, I saw a lot of people coming out with virtual choir stuff, and I was super overwhelmed, and I didn't know how long this would last, and I wasn't in the mindset that I'm in now. So I ended up with just my top choir testing out the, just audio world. And all I did was one kind of easy piece, and I put it on GarageBand and I sent it to them via Google Classroom we were using at the time. And that was it. I didn't even publish it anywhere. I just sent it to the students. And I was like, share with your families, share. And it wasn't like a formal concert or anything. It was just like a trial run because we weren't in real virtual school land. It was that spring weird time. And it made people's day. And the students were, and it was just an audio file. And I think that we get bogged down by it has to be a production and this keeping up with the Joneses mentality. And there's no need because this is the word that you hear over and over again, phrase I should say, uncharted territories. No one knows the right answer.
Yeah. And again, like we teach sort of, we are in the performing arts and we should always teach great performance. And it is part of our job. I'm very personally passionate about this. I know you are too, is teaching about how to make engaged looking choirs and that type of deal. But to me, it's music first is the thing. So I think it's a good transition to sort of the video aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of, I'll kick this off in that I had a great advantage, but also stress in that, I have this church job where we were putting out services every week. So I kind of got like enmeshed in very crazy basic video editing. Like I said, I've just dabbled with a little DaVinci Resolve. But mostly everything I've done so far, I mean, full church service and stuff, I've used iMovie. The whole Loud and Crowd concert was made using iMovie as my thing. I like it. It does stuff for me. I have no shame in using iMovie. I know some people think you got to go to bigger stuff, but honestly, it's worked beautifully for me and it sort of made some beautiful products for people. So the sort of the big thing that we've been doing, and then we can sort of talk about video and visual aspects conceptually. One thing we've done is sort of the simplest medium, which is we've like recorded some Zoom calls, right? So we finished and I've had to explain this to people because they get a little confused. But you do the audio first. Again, audio first. You make this beautiful audio recording that they take many attempts on and you mix together and voila. And then you have them sort of lip sync to that recording, which I think people treat lip syncing like a dirty word. And I think like, yeah, if you put like Conspirare singing underneath your kid lip syncing, that would be very bad.
That's
like
problematic. Yeah.
that is problematic. It's morally an issue. But your kids made the recording. And this is one thing I've been obsessed with. Like, this is how recording music is made. Like, how does Ariana Grande do a music video? She doesn't sing it live during the music video, right? She goes in the studio,
lays it's the perfect analogy.
She goes in and then she does it. But it's very, so I just want to say it's very important. It's your choir's recording. Like, I think that's like we get in this thing is not about the morals of this, but that's like its whole other discussion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Moral code. But, and then they sing along. Now, is the syncing perfect? It is not.
No.
Right? Sometimes is it better or worse depending? It's all over the place. Sometimes I've done these and it looks like I've done a virtual choir video, and sometimes I've done these and it's like way off. But the effect of seeing the kids or your singers making music is so powerful to people, right? It is so moving to people to see that, that's a really sort of good option. But, I know you've played around with this video stuff as well, but you'd also did some other things sort of visually with
so I want to say a genuine thank you to you, because I would have been a lost person if it wasn't for this idea, which all that video stuff came from you. So I'm just speaking kind of after learning from Max.
But
But
no, but this is classic you. This is classic everyone. Hers just looks so much better.
oh,
I will say,
stop.
like, this is no. This is like, I mean, this is where I have a bit of a let go gene, and you both are very much like work until.
So I think it goes back to our first conversation. The audio is the most important. So I had that sitting just brewing on my computer, and it was done because just as I talked about earlier, when you set a rehearsal structure, I ended up kind of changing that to a recording structure. Just pivoted, and everything was done. And then when it came to the video, when you record a Zoom call, as this one is recorded, the names disappear and it comes up with a beautiful, nice grid and it looks fancy schmancy. Um, like you spent a lot of time on another program. Now, as Max said, is it perfect sync wise? Of course not. Think about a Zoom call, think about a bunch of people talking at once. If they try to say the same thing at the same time, it's not going to look perfect. But it's okay because it's a pandemic. So it's okay. And from my perspective of being a public school teacher, what product is coming out? Okay, the students want to see themselves because they want to be like, yay, I was involved in something. And their families want to see that their faces are on the screen, the face behind the recording, if possible. Or you just do the audio and you put their names, whatever you choose. So when you record the Zoom call, it just creates a file for you, and you start and stop it kind of right as it's happening and right at the end, so it doesn't take up too much space. And I played that track, and I actually said to my students, sing, don't lip sync. That was a personal preference for
Oh
me. I
yeah,
said, when you actually phonate, it
mhm,
looks a little less fake.
I agree.
Now, Sally Sue at home might be lip syncing, and we won't be
Yeah,
able to
we'll
catch
never know.
Sally Sue. But for the most part, I think they were making sound, and it looked a little more authentic. And I said, I actually took it a little further. And I know you've done like themed stuff with your middle school
Yeah.
students when they do holiday songs. They're wearing, pajamas for winter and dreidel, 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 just awesome stuff. For my high schoolers, I said, hey, let's make this legit. Try to find a neutral background. And if you can't find a neutral background, create a virtual one. It doesn't, just something not distracting, and wear a black shirt. So make it like concert like. And I thought that was such a simple thing, but it made it look 100 times classier. And so they were wearing their black performance shirt. And I was like, I don't care. It could be a sweatshirt. It could be a t-shirt. Just like fake it till you make it. And then I recorded it. And then, as Max was saying, some other things that I did was I kind of just played this game of like how to trick the audience to thinking the lip syncing isn't as bad as it actually is the name of the game. So, you have this lip syncing that I think that if you, let's say the song was 3 minutes long, and if you had the Zoom call just going for 3 minutes with this like blah, blah, blah lip syncing, I think the audience would be like, oh, okay, it's a little much. So
The sync
instead,
just isn't good. That's the
yeah, it's just
track
this,
is
this,
great. And they
yeah,
stop
this.
listening to the track, right? They start trying to find, our brains want to find what's wrong, right? And so
Exactly.
instead of
And
listening
it's,
with what we want. Yeah.
yeah, and as Max said, like sometimes, I'll do these and the sync will actually be weirdly really good. And that comes to the conversation of how fast the choir's Wi-Fi is. Like there's just lots of variables. So anyway, what I ended up doing was creating mini projects with each of my classes. So for example, my treble chorus sang Over the Rainbow, and I said, what can I combat this lip syncing with? So I said, okay, we're gonna run the Zoom call through. So I just put that into iMovie, and it's literally a drag, like no editing, just drag. And I dragged the audio file in, drag, done. I disconnected my audio from the Zoom call so that there wasn't two audios, done. And really, that could have been a whole concert. But as we said, the lip syncing, you want to kind of change that up a little bit. So what I ended up doing was for the Over the Rainbow, we did a nature theme. So I said, do you have pictures of, rainbows would be ideal, but just nature, anything. And my treble chorus must have sent me 200 photos.
Yeah.
It was like the most exciting part of their day. They were like, oh yeah, I love taking photos. And you get to see this different side of the students. And then I asked them, what are your dreams? Because the last line, dreams really do come true. And so in the last 30 seconds or so, I put up a Google slide, made it on Google Slides, slid it into iMovie,
Yep.
and I just said, I said, when treble chorus was asked, what are their dreams? And I had all 40 dreams. And then at the end, I had a slide of their names weaved through those nature photos. So every 10 seconds or so, the audience is like, are their lips moving at the right time? Cut to a picture of a waterfall. Are their lips up? Cut to a picture of a rainbow. And it
Nice.
had the students' names on it. And at the beginning, I wrote the name of the song and I said, all photos taken by treble chorus. And I did that with every class. So we did a project that fit the theme. Another class did What Brings You Joy. Another class did Carol of the Bells. So we did a holiday theme. And then I think my other class did How Does Music Make You Feel? Because the piece was There Has to Be a Song. And the second way that I know we had talked about is there's a feature on iMovie called Picture in Picture, which,
Oh, we love
yeah,
picture.
we love picture in picture. So you have that
Even
Zoom
if this is
call.
a movie, get
Yeah,
ready.
you have that Zoom call, which just chills, no editing, and then you could slide other pictures, as I was just saying, but also videos over the Zoom call. So whenever I had a soloist, whenever I had a percussionist that I could feature, I would say, "Hey, soloist, can you just record a quick video for me of you singing the song?" And they'd be like, "Okay." And then I'd take the solo and I'd put it over the Zoom call. So it was kind of like messing with the audience's brain. And for example, my pop a cappella group is very solo based. There's two soloists that are singing through the entire piece. So what I did was I had that Zoom call, and then the soloists, I just moved them around the screen. I would put them center, I would fade them left, I would fade them right. And when I tell you, it was sliding a fade in and out, and taking, like, it was just. I remember one evening we were kind of sharing iMovie screens, and you were just like, "Yeah, you just press this one thing," and I just, I've shared this with a couple people, and I think that people just again are so bogged down that it has to be this big thing, and I don't think it does. And I think you could kind of like do collaborative projects with your ensembles, and it's actually in ways equally, or more worthwhile for the students.
Well, and the beauty of, and again, this is not an ad for Apple. I mean, I wish they were sponsoring us, but I will say one reason I love Apple products, but also things like WeVideo, which is a web-based video app that I've known many teachers use really successfully for this type of thing. It's similar to iMovie or even Soundtrap. Is what's beautiful about these products is they're meant to be used, right? I mean, there's a reason. I mean, someone spent so much time making iMovie so that you and me with zero experience could go in and go drag, 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 drop, experiment, do, do, moves it around, and so that we then make something that looks good. And I have, no one's actively doing this, but I do think sometimes people think that they have to do things a certain way. In the choral world, in the education world, we're obsessed with standards, right? And we're obsessed with sort of experts. But as you've said so many times in this, there are no experts in really how to do this in a sustainable way. Yeah, there
Mm-hmm.
are professional video editors out there, like who do this for news stations. But that's not really what we're looking for, right? And we're looking for something that we can do, with beginners. And what I love too is what I think started to make my projects more successful throughout the semester was getting student input and student and sort of student, like, what do you guys want to do for this video? So we're singing Let It Snow, and they're like, and everyone, I had them after lunch on a particularly like gross and rainy day when we were going to record the video, and everyone had a blanket. Like every single sixth grader had a blanket. And they're like, can we just put the blankets over our head and like sing back and forth like this? And I was like, absolutely you can. That is adorable. That's amazing, right? Like, and it worked. And with the Loud and Chorale, we had some outdoor rehearsals where we sang to our track that would then go in, and so we were able to use some of that outdoor footage, including too. I mean, there's so many things you can incorporate, and there's people doing stuff even more creative than us. I mean, people doing full, like, almost like film projects. Again, prioritizing
Yeah.
the audio, but
And
making really cool videos on top of it.
yeah, and I kind of, I said to myself, okay, I think the video is feasible with this Zoom recording. And then I, just off the cuff was kind of sitting and I was like, okay, but I think the Zoom recording for every song, maybe not, super ideal. What could I do? And I said, okay, I have a small jazz group of 10 singers. So, and you saw the video, I will. So what did I do? I was like, okay, can each of you guys send me a video of yourselves singing over the track? I sent them the final track and I was like, just sing over it. And because that was a smaller group, I just put on iMovie a title. I wrote the ensemble name and then I took 10 seconds from each kid's video. I think the song was 2 minutes long, so each kid got about 10 to 12 seconds. And I just put them on the left, on the right, on the left, and I just moved them back and forth. And with iMovie, you can just literally take the video and just go and like chop it and slide it, and everything is like, again, if we can do this, I think people can. And so I did that. And then with my tenor bass chorus, they, sang In the Still of the Night. And I said, okay, well, they're a club that meets after school. I meet them for 20 minutes. Attendance is shady. So what can I do? I don't think the Zoom call is the right answer. So I said, hey, can you just wear a black shirt and hold up a sign with your name and what year you graduate high school? Can you do that for me? Submit it right now. And
Yeah.
they did it. They said 15 minutes. And what did I do? I put their name on iMovie. I put the nice audio because it's all about the audio. And then I just said, oh, student one, oh, student two. And the amount of emails I got from teachers saying, oh, it was so nice to see so and so. And it was so nice. And that I didn't do that for all nine, but I picked and chose what I wanted to do. And it came together. So I think, the other part of it is just looking around, seeing what other people are doing, having conversations, not thinking you're alone, and you could really kind of create this cool thing.
Yeah, and I think highlighting text is really
Oh
easy,
yeah, yeah.
like for church and for anything, especially for a song that maybe has a text. I thought you if you print something in a program, you'd want it on the screen. So using titles, which again, not sponsored by Apple, but the again, we wish, but like putting titles in is really just takes a little playing around in there. But I know WeVideo has similar things, and a lot of other these basic video things, and even the complicated ones do too. But again, we're thinking about what is simple, because it didn't take zero amount of time to put these things together. It didn't. So it's not like I would say we probably did put in extra hours than we should have, or we're contractually whatever. I've never quite understood that anyway. But with these are all consuming jobs even in normal times, right? But I would not say that my life was ruined by making it. And right, I think it was sustainable. It was a sustainable amount of hard work. I went
Yeah,
to bed every night at a regular hour. That kind of deal.
yeah, and I kind of, I was talking to someone about this recently. It's kind of, that feeling when you finish conducting a concert in real times and you're
Yes.
so drained and you're like, whew, okay. And then you're like, I have a little break and I got to move on to my next endeavor and we could start our spring music. It's kind of how I felt. I was like, okay, I put my time in, like the concert came out, I can take a breather now. And I had a very similar feeling, which I think was kind of reassuring
Yeah.
because it felt as normal as it could feel. Was it a little strange that my concert premiered and I was sitting on my couch? Sure. But the students had something, the community had something, and then we could move on. And it was kind of like the same thing as you walk on a stage, you conduct, and the students sing the concert, the choir sings, and you move on. It's like we have to have some kind of experience like that as performing ensembles, or else it's rough roads, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's difficult. And it's very, in this sort of, as we wrap up, this sort of ties into, so the last thing I want to talk about is just sort of the why. I think that a lot of us we're continually, and I think I think they're good conversations to have about what is the role of music education, what
Mm-hmm.
is the role of a performing ensemble. That's something I think we're discussing now more than ever, right, as we try to figure this out and we try to prioritize sort of what's important. And you know to your point, I mean, it's again very hippy dippy of me, but I think people want to create, people want things that are monuments for their life, and performing ensembles. And we talked about with my kids, part of our concert was, why do we put on concerts every year around the holiday time, right? Why do we put on concerts at all at school? And it's to sort of celebrate our community. It's to celebrate give our parents joy, our extended family joy. It's to step out of our comfort zones. I had kids send in solos for my concert that we strung together with their choral pieces. Kids that the amount of teachers that would reach out to me and say, I didn't know so and so could do this, and I automatically would say, hey, email them, like email that kid right now and say, I watched this and it was really powerful. That's going to make a ginormous difference in a kid's life.
Yeah.
And I think about like the community choir, like Loud and Chorale, who put on a virtual concert. We like to say, we're a community choir that is community first, right? And we were able to sort of feature our sponsors at the beginning. We were able to feature you know, a soloist from within the chorale. You know, it was public. Many different groups saw it, and in Loudoun County, and in, you know, so the area. And again, bringing that joy to people. I just think people really want to create. It's not to say that there aren't other engaging things they can do, but like we can't. Will I think about it this way: we are not entertaining enough to compete with Netflix, right? Right? We're not. Like Netflix is really good. And then if Netflix is bad, then you can watch Disney Plus and you can watch Hulu, right? There's a lot of ways to be entertained in our world these days, right? And what we do is about more than entertainment. And it's about creating something, right? It's about improving our skills, learning a new skill, as far as, you know, the adult learners I work with. So for me, that's the why, is that people sort of really want to create, you know?
Yeah, and I think, you know, a lot of choral conductors are nervous in this time because they see, as we've mentioned, they see these big sort of big projects. And I think that, you know, we've spoken a lot about ensembles, and what was important to me was equity, making sure every single member of every single ensemble was featured in the same way.
Mm.
Obviously, extra ensembles, you know, students that did more were featured more, but my curricular ensembles, if you were in my class, and I believe you did the same, and Loudon, and you know, all of the avenues that you work with, you know, you made them featured. And I think, you know, teachers get bogged down by that, and they say, oh, well, if I have to include everybody, I don't know if I can do it. And it's like, you gotta find a way to make it happen creatively. And it may not be that you do these big projects. It may be, okay, well, this group's going to do this minute long holiday carol, and this group's going to do this minute long, and then I'm going to have these 4 kids that are super creative work on this project. And you might need to kind of tinker with what you're going to do. Like you were saying, you know, you did these smaller numbers, and then you had students do individual solos. You know, it may not be a traditional concert. And that is totally okay, because nothing about teaching in our homes is traditional, unless you're an online school teacher, which is not many people. So I think the biggest takeaway I've had with talking to you is you have to just make it work for you. And you should really explore things that are tangible and attainable for you
Yeah.
and for your situations.
And to just, as I love what you said about sort of it's not going to be a traditional concert. I mean, one thing I love pre this winter thing we put on, which was a larger project for us. We were sort of doing a mini project every month, and actually something I'm going to start with in January and February as the kids come back. Probably a mix of virtual and in person for my school, and as Loud and Corral starts virtually, and then hopefully we move to other stuff. Is, you know, can we do sort of more projects? Can our timetable be a little different? You know,
Yeah.
and you know, how can, you know, what in this sort of environment, what works? And I think engaging your kids, because I don't want to get to the end of this sort of pandemic, of which there's going to be an end. That's a happy yay thing.
Yeah.
I want all our singers to be there for that. I don't want them to become disengaged from choral singing. I don't want them
Yeah.
to be disengaged from each other. I don't want them to forget that magic, so that, you know, we don't have this sort of choirs flatten or people go away from them. We want people to be pumped, to come back, and to know that we as their conductors cared for them and gave
Yeah.
them opportunities at this time.
Yeah.
Because you have
Nicely
kids
said.
signing up. Because you have kids signing up, right? I mean, that's
Yeah, and
registration, and you know, thinking about next year and stuff. You
yeah,
know.
it's also, you know, part of our jobs in whatever capacity that may be is about retention.
Mm.
And when a singer, whether it's your community choir, your church choir, your school choir, my school choir, when they sign up for a performing ensemble, they want a performing ensemble in
Mhm.
some way. And you may say to yourself, well, that's impossible right now. And I don't think that that's the answer. I think that it's possible, but it may just need to be in a totally different mindset than you're used to or comfortable with at first. But you have to kind of figure it out, for in some way, even if it's like the smallest way possible. Like you're going to do a minute long song and have them like hold up a sign that says like I love chorus, and just stand there for a minute. Like that's cool. Like
Yeah.
no, everybody will respect that and everybody will love that. But just to give them something to kind of hold on to in that performance capacity, I think is super super critical, for our art form.
Yeah, and nicely said. All right, well, we hit all our topics. Arielle, this was such a deep joy to like talk about this in an official way. And you know, uh, not over text in actual in Zoom life. And if again, we'll have sort of links and information below and stuff. And Ariel and I love to talk to people, and we're
Yes.
really passionate about helping choirs. So we'll have some way for you, anyone who's watching this, if you want to contact us, have any questions, we'll do our best to help because we're giant choral nerds. We love this community. We love it. I mean, that's why we do it, and we're just here to help however we can.
Yeah, exactly what Max said. I thoroughly enjoy it. I know he does too. And this is a tough time, and we kind of navigated through a way to be, successful and sustainable given, the circumstances that we're in, which we're both in very different circumstances. So, um, I'm happy to help and just show people what has worked, and maybe if 1% of that works for you, it'll be a little bit better of a day for you in the future.
Absolutely. All right. Well, peace, everybody, and see you next time. Thanks.